Evening, and thank you so much for joining us. Is this not seen as too little too late?
Well, not according to the Security Council, Lulu. Essentially, this is the firmest response, as you mentioned in that intro. This is a resolution. It is legally binding. And remember, we don't have a genocide on our hands yet. We have a low-level conflict. And one also has to consider the permutations we have in New York. You have a Security Council made up of 15 members, and you have Russia, Venezuela, and some African countries on one side that says this is a sovereign issue. Let the people of Burundi deal with this. And then you have the other members of the Security Council, what you call Western countries, the UK, France, the United Kingdom, clubbing together essentially and wanting to push for more action. So it's, you know, those divides that need to be negotiated. And what a number of council members came out to talk to the media about after that resolution was adopted, Ludo, was the sense of unanimity in the council. I mean, when you look at situations in Syria and elsewhere, we haven't seen the levels of unanimity as we are seeing today on Burundi.
Sherwin, the resolution asks Secretary General Ban Ki-moon to deploy a team to Burundi to work with the government and the African Union and other partners. Are there indications from Burundi on how they will embrace this opportunity?
No indications yet. I mean, this resolution is literally 2 hours old, Mahendra, but essentially what the Secretary General has now been tasked with is to send a team, to deploy a team to look at the political situation, essentially to look at what can be done to support the efforts of Uganda's mediator, Yoweri Museveni, and in addition to that, to look at the security situation. What can be done to stem what everyone in the international community now believes is an escalation in this crisis? This is a region that is susceptible to hate speech, to genocide, to wars that are based along ethnic lines. So the Secretary General has been tasked very critically here to look at whether we need an African peacekeeping force, whether blue helmets need to be deployed in Burundi, and we will give the Secretary General 15 days for that. I asked Samantha Power, the US ambassador, when she came to the stakeout after that resolution was adopted, what she would like to see from the Secretary General, and she said she didn't want to micromanage, she didn't want to preempt, she wanted to give him the space to decide for himself. So I can tell you they're in a lunch with him right now, and I'm sure they're speaking a little more candidly to the Secretary General than they might have been doing to the media.
Now, Sherwin, the United Nations must be worried about the racial or tribal fibers that characterize some of the allegations of human rights violations. Now, what's the latest with regards to that?
Well, essentially, Lulu, if you look at the length at which it has taken us to get to the point of this resolution, there have been a number of statements from the UN Secretary General, statements from the UN Security Council that essentially are not legally binding. A resolution is legally binding. And what broke the camel's back is the rhetoric that we've been hearing on the ground from President Pierre Nkurunziza or from the President of the Senate. Those disturbing comments are what really prompted this unanimous decision in the Security Council today. This is a region that is easily susceptible. You have Rwanda, the historic genocide, where the international community failed to arrest the situation soon enough. So there are very, very clear fears that this is a region that could explode. Burundi's civil war ended as not that long ago, 2006. So clearly there are still elements that exist on the ground. We talk regularly about the Arusha peace accords that need to be respected. Clearly those now need to be implemented. But they do also speak to the long-standing divisions that exist in this country. So it takes very little to get this fire, a spark for this fire to start again. And this is what this resolution is essentially about. The hate speech we've been hearing on the ground and efforts by the international community not to have a repeat of what happened in Rwanda.
Yes, Sherwin, Burundi has also questioned why its violence is likened to that of the Rwanda genocide.
Well, I think, Mahendra, if you just listen to the speech of Paul Kagame not so long ago, he was talking about how Burundi's leaders were standing by while their people were dying. I think there is a sense of unanimity on this question, whether it be from the African Union, whether it be from the United Nations and the international community, that everything, all hands on deck, need to be done in a region that too quickly can descend into a civil conflict that could very easily be based on ethnic lines. Remember, you have similar ethnic groups that you have in Rwanda Rwanda, in Burundi, you have a Hutu majority and a Tutsi minority. Speak to the 200,000, the over 200,000 people that have fled into neighboring countries, the over 200 people that have died, their families. These are the concerns. Those 200,000 people are the ones that are fearing what might happen in a country that has a history that should essentially ensure that we do not repeat what happened in the past.
Now, Sherwin, the United Nations, working in collaboration with bodies like the African Union, is walking this path for a second time with Burundi from the time of its civil war. Now, what mechanism exists within the African Union and the United Nations, respectively, to avert these kind of situations? Because it's not the first time.
Absolutely good question, Lulu. You're essentially asking us what tools exist at the United Nations and the African Union to prevent a genocide or a civil war or a conflict from escalating. And that's essentially what the UK presidency of this council, Ambassador Matthew Rycroft, was speaking to. We asked him, what sort of tools exist at the United Nations? And he was saying, well, sanctions, targeted sanctions need to be put on the table. Let's hurt them where it matters. And if that doesn't work, the Secretary General, part of those recommendations possibly, Lulu, could look at various options, including human rights monitors on the ground. If you have monitors on the ground, the argument is you won't have as much conflict as we're seeing today. And then as a final option is essentially a UN peacekeeping mission. Of course, there are various permutations, various difficulties. You need the troops. There are questions being raised of where those troops will come from. Does it mean redirecting resources from close by missions like MONUSCO, where we have a huge South African contingent there? Where will the resources come from? He has 15 days to come up with those answers, so watch this space.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Sherwin. That was SABC correspondent Sherwin Bryce-Pease joining us live from New York.